This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Welcome to Purpose Driven Sobriety. Okay, thank you for joining the Purpose Driven Sobriety podcast. My name is Christine and I'm an alcoholic. I want to thank the sponsor of today's show, who happens to be my daughter, Erica McDonald Photography. So if you are in the Central Texas area and need any type of photography, she specializes in little babies. She is the baby whisperer. She does these, she twists and turns these newborns like they're clay. It's amazing. Senior pictures, maternity pictures, all the things. Look up Erica McDonald Photography on the intraweb, and you can find her. She's an amazing photographer, and I am a little bit biased. So thank you, Erica, for sponsoring. So today I have Miss Casey Moore with me, and I met Casey through. We have a mutual friend, Deanna, and then we visited. You and your husband have a church that you run here in Central Texas, Top Hand. Cowboy Church.
Right.
And it's in. Is it technically Valley Mills?
It's in Valley Mills, I guess, address.
Okay.
It's on the Waco side of Valley
I got
Mills,
it.
yeah.
Okay, so it's not that far out at all,
Right.
and it's a lovely,
It's
lovely
like 15
church.
minutes from Waco, I think, off Highway 6.
You know what just impressed the hound out of me with that church is the community and how you hold up, especially I witnessed that with Deanna with her
Yes,
illness and stuff
yes.
like that. So, but I did learn that you were in recovery.
Yes.
And so, it's so funny because I live this life so out loud but still when you hear someone that's in recovery and I have one of those non-recovery reactions, like, no way, not
I know.
her.
What?
Well, you
Her?
kidding me?
She's
Yeah,
soccer mom.
right. And it's so funny. It just goes to show, So thank you for
Yes.
being here. And so,
Happy to be.
basically, on the show, we just talk about what it was like, what happened, and what you're like now. I was asked early on, who's your audience? And I thought, golly, that was a tough question. And then I thought, no, it's not. It's me before I got sober, just to extend that hand of help, or hope rather, to the person who's still suffering. So I want to hear all the things. Tell me, who is Casey Moore?
Okay.
What happened?
Well, I guess going way back probably is the way to start. Man, I was raised by amazing parents, really, really good home life, strong believers, just good people, really good people. But for some reason, my whole life, even when I remember even being really young, I just had a lot of self-doubt that turned into kind of basically almost like self-hate. Like I just nothing about myself was good enough in my mind.
Were you an only child?
Nope. I had older brother and sister that were 8 and 9 years older than me.
Oh, wow.
So, and then me. So
Okay.
there was a big gap.
Yeah.
And, I look back at my school age and high school and junior high, and I had a great life. I was in sports and had lots of friends, and went to a big school in the Dallas area, went to North Mesquite High School, and went to church, was in a big church and active. But I guess I always just, I don't know, I just had this thing in me all the time that just felt like I wasn't good enough. And it really damaged a lot of my life. I even found myself almost like lying and fabricating stories and just trying to get attention.
Embellish.
Just a lot of things like that. And so, but I don't know why my parents were always affirming and loving. And, I remember my mom just holding me in front of the mirror and like, what do you see? Like, what is so awful that you see? Like, I don't see what you see, and I'm like, well, you're my mom. So
That had to be
you have
really
say
hard
that,
for her.
Yeah, it really was, because they were, like I said, they were great people, and they did so much for us growing up, and it was painful for them. And so I always had that kind of thing. I went off to college, and I got pregnant in college, and that was a pretty big blow. My plan was to give him up for adoption, and that was my plan all the way through my pregnancy. And after he was born, I just decided I couldn't do it. I was 20 years old and I was like, I want to do this, And so everything changed, for me at that point because I had a baby. But I still had that failure kind of feeling.
Sure.
My parents, we were very active in church. My dad was a deacon. My mom taught Sunday school. We went to a big church. It was back then. I mean, unfortunately, it's not as scandalous now when that happens, but back then it was a little bit more. That was in the early 90s.
Now, did you go to school nearby where you lived?
You mean when I went to college?
I
went to Howard Payne University.
Okay.
So I came home.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. So anyway, I think for me, it just was, I don't know, maybe, I don't know if it was just it just was another letdown. Like another letdown. And although I don't look at my son as a letdown, but just the decisions, and here I am, letting my parents down again, and not being who they raised me to be and all that. So anyway, I started being a mom early on. His dad was not involved and never pursued that. And so, it was just me. And so it was tough, and we lived at home for a little while and then got out on my own, and still just struggled a lot. Just with my self-worth and stuff like that. So anyway, I met my husband when my son was about 2 years old. And we married. This is my first husband. I'm my second marriage, but my first husband, we married, let's see, in 98, I guess. So by the time we married, we dated a long time. My son was 7 years old, I guess. So anyway, we married. He came from a good home too. But I always just felt a lot of pressure from him. He was, at this point, after having a baby, I was overweight. I was very, very self-conscious of my body. Just a lot. And so he was successful, but he was also a personal trainer. So he was very fit. And I just always felt, I'm just like, I can't even believe he married me. And I think it just perpetuated this problem that I had. And he was, bless his heart, he wasn't very affirming. In fact, he was very hard on me physically.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just felt like, gosh, I really want to lose weight. I want to lose weight. What can I do? And I just felt like I kept failing at everything I would try. And so I had met a girl that had lost a lot of weight. And I was asking her, what'd you do? What are you doing? And she was like, oh, just kind of working out, eating right, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, and it just kept really losing. I was like, help me. What are you doing? She said, well, that she was doing this. She was taking this drug. It was illegal, but she was only doing it for a short period of time and then going to get off of it, but it'd be fine. It was basically like speed is what she said. And so I was like, okay. So I even went home, talked to my husband. He was like, yeah, I'll do it, and I'm like, okay, I'll do it. And so I did. Well, when I was thinking a pill.
Right.
But she was like, no, you smoke it. And I'm like, okay. And so I kind of went into it a little naive. And anyway, bottom line, it was meth is what it was. And so I was like, okay, I can do this for a short period of time, kind of get a jump start was my thought. And I know looking back, I'm like, how did you think that? Like, why?
I get it. I totally get it. I'm like, that's a very rational, rational way of thinking of it. Just a little, yeah.
Just a jump start, maybe 6 weeks, 2 months, I'll be good. Well, of course, by 6 weeks or 2 months, I was, using it almost every day.
Yeah.
And I kept jobs through that time. Back then I was in fundraising and I kept really good jobs. And, but I would eventually lose the job for one reason or another, whether it be not showing up or things like that. The drugs that really took over. But then I would just go out and get another job. And I mean, like a director of fundraising position, like big positions. I could get a job really quick. How I could do it, I don't know, because they should call my references because they would be like, wow, she quit showing up to work and
right.
blah, blah, blah. But so I rocked along with that for probably about 5 years, I guess. And at this point, I was, I guess, managing it in a way. I was still going to work. I would go to work in the morning. Like I would smoke in the morning, go to work. Then I would leave at lunch and I would go to like crazy, but like I would go to car washes because you'd be kind of enclosed.
Right.
Do it. I would go like 2 or 3 car washes at lunch. Like go because I lived in Dallas, so there's nowhere to really hide. So
right.
I would go in those, so it's like
enclosed. Yeah.
kinda
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah.
And I would smoke and I'd go back to work. And I mean, meth, I'm not sure how you know much about that, but it's very like energy driven. But at some point you crash, I mean, you can only stay awake. And I would stay awake for days at a time. And I did really well at work because I was just moving all the time, but it would always catch up with me. Always, always. So eventually it would just be kind of a catastrophe.
But were you losing weight?
Oh yeah, I was at first, big time.
Oh, wow.
And there came a point where I didn't anymore. It just kind of stopped, and I didn't really lose any more weight. And anyway, but I just at that point I was totally hooked on it. Like I couldn't figure out how I could go without. And it started taking things over. My husband at the time, he started using about a year after I did, and so then we both were. Then I had my son there, and bless his heart, I used from the time he was 8 to 16 is the time. I used for about 8.5 years. And, he knew something was going on. I ended up leaving my husband when my son was about 14, and we moved into an apartment. Actually, I didn't voluntarily leave. My parents came over when I was gone one day, and my husband was there, and they were like, "You're going to take a drug test." He was like, "No." And anyway, he did. And I mean, I'm on the phone with him going, "Why would you take a drug test? You're a 40-year-old man." You tell him no. You tell him to leave the house. But he did. And of course he tested positive. And so they came back to me and said, "You're moving out or we're taking your son. So you decide."
So did they know you were using?
No, my son was
Really?
telling them that he was, and they were just kind of blinded to me. They just thought it was all him.
Oh, wow.
Carson knew that I was, but he was totally covering for me. I didn't know he knew, but he had figured it out. And he was really trying to throw my husband under the bus, like,
trying to get. It sounds like he was trying to get some help and just didn't.
Some help, but
didn't want to betray you, right?
Right. And so we moved out at that point because I didn't want to take him from me. So we moved out, and I stopped for about a month, I guess, but I wasn't in recovery or anything. I didn't go to any meetings or anything like that. I just stopped for about a month, maybe a little longer. But I mean, if you don't figure out why,
Yep.
I mean, I'm not saying that nobody can stop without some sort of program, but it's very rare. I mean, it's very, very rare. So, I stopped for about a month, 6 weeks, and then just started back up again. And so we were living in an apartment then. And then by the time that things got really hairy, probably the last 2 years, year and a half, I just didn't work. And I don't know how I was making it. I mean, I think my parents had helped me some, and I was constantly getting eviction notices, and, everything was just kind of spiraling. And my son at this point was really suffering, really suffering. And my parents were picking him up and doing stuff with him. And I was always, "Oh, I'm on my way," but then never come, that sort of thing. A lot of lying, a lot of manipulation, that kind of thing. And then finally I just got super, super sick, very, very, very ill. I got pneumonia. I had some abscessed teeth. I had an infection in my blood. I mean, just a lot. And I mean, I really believe, because I was a Christian, I was a believer, before all this. And so I always had this pull in my spirit, but I was so ashamed I was even ashamed to pray. Like, God is definitely not going to be listening to my prayer, because I mean, I am like off the rails. And so I pretty much just, I feel like God almost like struck me down, like, I'm going to get to you one way or another. And he made me so incredibly ill that I just couldn't, almost died. I just couldn't function. I was so very sick. So finally I got some help. I told my mom, I said, "I need help." And she was like, "Okay." I mean, it's like they're waiting for me to say the word. So they got me some help. They got me healthy, but it's like I slept, I was I feel like weeks, and I woke up and I'm like, man, I thought I would never go another day, and here I've gone a couple of weeks and haven't done it. So I felt a little slightly empowered, like, okay, I'll do that. Some
strength.
But I didn't really immediately start into groups or anything like that. And my parents were trying to get some help. Like, what do we do? How do we help her? They moved us into their house, me and Carson. And they gave me, a lot of rules. They're like, "Look, we're going to drug test you whenever we want to. If you ever refuse a drug test, you're out. If you ever test positive, you're out. we'll keep Carson, but you're gone. And Carson, poor thing, I remember him coming into the room. He was overhearing all the rules, and he was like, if y'all kick her out, I'm going with her.
Oh, baby.
I know.
Oh.
And I was like, it broke my heart. I mean, I was so broken at that time, but I remember thinking, man, I've really done it on him, and so it was really, really tough. And so once we got there, before I started recovery or anything, I kind of was just getting my feet back underneath me. And once I think Carson knew I was safe, he got really angry. Very, very
dear.
angry. And he was very upset with me, very, very ugly, said all kinds of horrible things. And it was hard. And I'll kind of go back to that. But basically what happened is a guy came over to fix my dad's computer at the house. And somehow they started talking about recovery. I don't know how. And he was like, my daughter, I had been there a very short time at that point, maybe a month. And so the guy was like, she's got to get into a group. Like, she's got to get into something. She cannot do this alone. Like, there's no way.
That was an angel right there. Ooh, I just got chills. That was an angel right there.
My parents had no real connection to that world. Recovery, we had not experienced that in our home.
Well, and the fact that your dad was willing and open to talk to a complete stranger. Oh, man.
They were desperate,
That's
and
amazing.
we've said that guy was an angel because he was just a computer guy. So I remember my parents sat me down and said, you're going to have to go to groups. And I was like, what? No, I don't want to do this. Like, no, this is part of it now. You got to try this out. And there was a few NA groups. There was a ton of AA groups, more AA than NA. But to me, I didn't really care what group I was in, because in my head, I wasn't real legalistic about, and some groups are, if you're an alcoholic, you cannot go if you're a drug addict.
Dumb.
Which to me, it's like, guys, we're all in this together here.
A spiritual malady is a spiritual malady, no matter how you
together.
decorate it. That's exactly right.
So I started in NA, but and my parents, they were like, they got a lot of good advice, and they were like, okay, this is what you need to do. She needs to get in groups. She doesn't need to have any access to money. She needs to. I mean, my parents literally drove me to meetings for the first 90 days. Like,
wow.
They wouldn't even let me drive myself. They drove me and waited outside. If it was an open meeting, I think they came in maybe a couple times in the beginning. But other than that, that's it. They just kind of drove me, waited. And sometimes I went to maybe 2 meetings a day, whatever. Basically, they were told recovery is her job. Okay, she's got to do that.
Yep.
Because if you force her right now to go get a job, I mean, she's got to get this under control first.
Right.
So they did. So for, a solid, probably about 6 or 8 months, that's all I did was meetings. And no bank account, no nothing, no access, no trust at all.
How were you feeling during that time? Did you take to it, or did you just think, okay, this is what I'm being made to do?
It went in waves. I mean, sometimes I was like, wow, I'm so grateful, that I have parents here. Once I got into meetings, I realized how lucky and grateful and blessed I was, because a lot of people were doing it on their own. They had no support. I did have support. So I wasn't having to try to figure out recovery and pay my bills at that point.
Right.
They kind of scooped all that up into
Sure.
one. So I was really grateful, but I was also very like, my gosh, I mean, I'm 38 years old. I guess that's how it was. Yeah, 38 years old, and you're treating me like a child. And I remember I'd been there like maybe a couple months, and they wanted to drug test me. And I was like, are you kidding? I said, y'all, I have been doing everything you asked me to do, and I can't believe you don't trust me. And they're looking at me like,
excuse me.
Are you kidding me now? Like, you have lied, cheated, I mean, everything. And you've been here for 2 months, and you're ready.
Now you're put out.
Because, I'm put out. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, okay.
There's that.
Yeah, I know. So it was kind of it went in waves. And I was frustrated at times that I was having to be there, but I also knew why. I mean, I was there because of me.
Right.
And I had lost so much because of me. And I needed to be more focused on, hey, what's going on with with my child? Well, I started to want to be a mom to him. And he was like, Ouch. I've done my own thing for all these years. I'm 12 years old and staying out to whenever I want to stay out to. And now you want to be a mom, and you want me to come home. You want me to check in. You want me to be respectful. And he was just not having it. And at that point I was in groups. So it was helpful because I could kind of talk with others that are that are struggling with that. And they were like,
Right.
you got to let him be mad. Now, my dad was fine with him being mad, but he was not fine with him, standing over me and berating me while I'm in bed trying to sleep or something like that. He's like, look, I know you're mad. You have every right to be mad.
You're still going to
but
be
I
respectful.
can't stand there and listen to you call your mom these names and say you wish, that she wouldn't live and, stuff like that. So we did a lot of counseling and it was good. I mean, the counseling was good. It took a long time. I think the counseling got us a jump start, but I really think he just needed to see more time, So it was a journey for Carson and I, and a real journey. And I mean, I'm 15 years down the road now, and it's still it's not we don't have trouble like that anymore, but it took a long time.
So so hang on, let's back up. How were you in the recovery program? Were you getting it, or were you just doing the thing?
I was full in.
Okay.
I got full in from the get-go. I got a sponsor. I started with the program.
That's amazing.
I went full in from the get-go. So I don't know what the stats are, but back then, the stats for meth were pretty daunting. At one point, it was like 89% of anybody who ever does meth never quits.
Right.
They either just do it their whole life, they die, meth addict, whatever. And then of that 11%, only like 2% would ever quit once and not go back. Usually it's a lot of relapses. Well, I never relapsed. I mean, once I quit, that was it. I never relapsed, but I think it's because of how quick I got into recovery.
Right.
And how quick I got into the working the steps. And I mean, I had a sponsor that was very, very good. I mean, she was ahead of me by a couple of years, and she was a nurse, and she was kind of no nonsense. And she that's what we need. Pushed me. Yeah. And it was good. I mean, it helped me. And then of course, once I went through the steps and had a couple of years under my belt, then I started sponsoring, which also is good because it keeps you accountable and keeps you in the program on track. So, I mean, I know my relationship with the Lord and recovery, the recovery programs, AA, NA, all those programs. I mean, it just is literally what it's what saved me.
They work. I mean,
it works. And that, I deal with people all the time now. They're like, well, meetings are not for me. I'm like, I don't know
what you're missing. And that gets me. Cause I literally just drove from one here to come meet you today. And it's like, I go there and it's like my soul just gorges on, it's like a gluttonous thing where it just soaks in all of this energy from these people that I need to just be,
and even the ones that have 30 days. Like when I go into a meeting and someone's got 30 days, I'm like, Lord, help me. Like, please, Lord, like, let me remember.
But for the grace of God.
Yes. And then like, I don't want to go back there. I don't want to be that broken. And I think that's part of the reason why I'm so open with my story is because it really forces me to be accountable. Like, I want people to know, because the more people that know, if I were to slip and do something, I mean, I just look at all of the people I would let down.
Well, and all the people that would help take care of you and would recognize something's not right, what's going on with you, and staying close to your recovery community. And, because it's the people that are like us that are more apt to go, what the hell's going on with you? Yeah, I know something's not right. Whereas other people might dance around
exactly
it.
Right.
And it's just, it's such a beautiful.
I don't know how people do it without recovery meetings.
I don't either.
And it doesn't, I mean, AA, NA, if you want to do Celebrate Recovery, if you want to do Recovery for Life, I mean, anything that you want to do, but you've got to get into something that has a structure and has a plan. And I think that's for me. I mean, I was always a planner. And so like, give me a plan and let me work the plan. And I think that's kind of where the AA and the NA meetings kind of worked for me, because it was, okay, here's a plan.
Yeah.
Here's a structure. It's a step program. You do 1, 2, 3. But here, the way I look at the steps it's a way of living. It's not just about alcohol or drugs. I mean, it's a good way to live if you don't have an addiction
100%. Well, and Rick, my husband, even says this stuff ought to be taught in high school.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a great point.
What do you have control over? Zero.
Right, zero.
Nothing.
Yeah.
And when you're wrong, admit it,
And just like holding on to resentments and things like that is so and making amends and getting those things done and off your chest and
Putting them down.
putting them down and not holding on to them. And I think that's probably the amends process is hard for a reason. But it's very vital. And I do talk to people and they're like, well, I think I can do it without meetings. And I'm always like, I don't know how. Or they want me to help them, but they don't want to go to meetings. I'm like, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah. Well, that's like, baking a cake and leaving the flour out. It's like you're not going to get the same results. This for 88 years, this shit has worked. It has
recovered.
Gazillion, and the stats are still as staggering. When I was the chairperson for the big Centacor fundraiser a couple of years ago, I learned. 17% of us go on to live a reasonably productive, decent life, and the rest of us either die from the disease or want to die, because, and I talk about my dad, God rest his soul, was a dry drunk my entire life. He quit drinking, and being sober is not recovery. It's not recovery. Being sober, being in sobriety is wonderful and great because I'll go to my grave believing that we are all born with that God-shaped hole, that we try to fill with something. Some fill it with anger, resentment, anxiety, depression, gambling, sex, drugs, name it. We try to fill that hole with something. And so when you take away what was working for me, which for me was alcohol and for you meth. When you take that away, it's like you're just left with a gaping hole. And it's like, what now? I would oh man, I can't, oh golly. And that too is why I keep telling my story, because I can go back there in a hypersecond to that feeling.
And it's one decision, we're one decision away. And in recovery in 2010, so 2 years into recovery, my mom was diagnosed with cancer. And I was like, I was devastated. And it was hard because I know with meth and I'm sure alcohol and everything else, you really don't have any feelings. You mask everything.
Right. You try to suppress them.
You're sad, you use, you're hungry, you use, you're mad, you use. Everything.
Yep.
So you don't really feel anything to its full extent. Well, I felt like once I quit using, like every feeling was so strong, so amplified. I was feeling it all. Anything that was going on, I felt it to the extreme. Because I guess, I just haven't felt in so long. So when my mom was diagnosed, even though I was 2 years, and God just lined this out, because I had 2 years under my belt. So I was solid in recovery. I'm the type of person, I realize not everybody is like this, but this is the only way it works for me. I don't drink. A lot of people say, well, drinking was never a problem. Drugs was a problem. So I can have a social drink. I'm sorry. I am not that person.
Because that's not the truth. Mind altering is mind altering. Nothing drives me nuts more than someone coming into an AA room and going, well, I don't drink, but I smoke pot, but I don't drink. It's like, okay.
Yeah. I'm like, no, that doesn't work. And I've even had people like, will you sponsor me? Is it okay if I still drink? I'm like, absolutely not. Like, I don't know how to do that.
No.
So, and the way I look at it is I know several people in NA that alcohol was not their problem, that it was cocaine or meth or whatever, pills, whatever. And they felt like they could have a drink from time to time. And those people went back to using what they really wanted to do. And that's my fear.
Yep.
I have a few drinks and I'm like, I don't want this.
Right.
I want what I really want.
Right. If this is good, what's better?
Yeah. And alcohol, did I drink beforehand? Absolutely. But it was kind of a put it down, that meth is the one that,
took you to your knees. Right.
Right. So to me, I don't get that. I don't understand it. And that's just been my thing. So whenever my mom was diagnosed, it was weird. I didn't really have the desire to go back to using. I felt the desire to escape or numb or not hurt. But I found that in like, I'm going to take a nap. I'm going to take a nap. I'm going to take a nap. So I felt like, okay, I would lay down for a second and take a little bit of a nap and try just to chill, relax, try to get my head around what was going on. And she was diagnosed with a cancer called neuroendocrine carcinoma. And it's a really long, kind of a slow cancer. It's inoperable. There's nothing you can do about it. It doesn't even respond to chemo, which on one hand is good because they don't go through that hell.
Right.
But on the other hand, there's no cure. But it's slow growing.
Wow.
So she lived 6 years. But the really great thing about it is I was present. I mean, I was there through all of it. And if it had happened a few years prior, I would have
No
died.
telling. Right.
And she would have earlier, because it would have just broken her. So the fact that God allowed me to get my feet underneath me before she's diagnosed, she gets to see me
Healthy
thriving,
and
healthy,
right.
coming back. That was 2 years. She died in 16, so I had 8 years of sobriety when she died. And at that point, at my 3-year, around 3.5 years is when Greg and I married. So she got to see me happy, healthy, married, preacher's wife of all things.
I know, isn't that funny?
Mean, that's just like, I'm like, Lord, you're funny. Like, this is funny because, like, I'm always saying, like, meth addict to preacher's wife. Like, there's a book in there.
Right, right. There's a story that needs to be told.
But, it's crazy. It's just, it's very crazy that's what happened. But my mom got to see all that and got to see me not running and facing problems head on, and growing up and being a mom. And even though Carson, it was still a struggle with Carson for a long time, we were still on the road.
Right. She knew you were on the path.
We were on the road,
right.
and things were better. And so, I'm grateful for God in the timing of all that. I just feel like he allowed me to do something that if it had happened several years earlier, I just wouldn't have been there for it. I couldn't have. I would have been so devastated that I just would have been deeper and deeper and deeper, and
right.
probably taken my own life in the
exactly.
whole thing. So,
man.
but she, my mom told me one thing whenever I got pregnant with Carson, way back in the 90s, early 90s. She said after this, the tragedy is not that you're pregnant and you're not married and you're young. The tragedy, if you don't take this and do something with it, be better. So I didn't really hear that back then. But later on in life, after I was clean and sober and not using and everything, is probably maybe a year, not even a year, because I was still not working yet at that point. And she's like, don't let your suffering go to waste. And she was like, you have suffered so much, whether it be at your hands or whatever, but you've suffered so much. And if you don't share and you don't tell people how you got through.
Wow. You sure she wasn't in recovery?
Right. I know. She
never waste a hurt.
Yep.
Never waste a hurt.
If you have hope, you have the answer, you have the hope. And if you don't share that, and if you don't tell, then your suffering was a waste. And why? How can you let it be a waste? Don't let your suffering go to waste.
Way to go, Mom. Way to go, Mom.
But yeah, so that's something that I've lived by since then. I have lived by that. Like, okay, I'm not ashamed. I mean, here I am, a pastor's wife. Most everybody at that church knows my story. I've told it publicly. They know it. And every time I share, or every time I put something on social media or anything, I'll get a call. I'll get a message like, hey, can you help me, my son or my husband or me or something like that? And I'm like, yes, I can. And that's part of recovery.
Oh, 100%.
You got to do that part.
Yes.
But you're not finished.
Well,
you're finished.
Praise God.
Yeah,
praise God.
Finished.
But it's when, I hate to bother you, but I'm going, and it's like, oh my gosh, no, because you don't keep it. You cannot keep it unless you give it away. I believe that to my core. And I just, to pour into someone else, and to allow your test to be your testimony, is just, that's what it's all about.
Yeah. And I think for me, it keeps me incredibly accountable. It just keeps me, I guess, I don't know, the more people that know, the more people I have to let down. You know what I mean? And so I can't, and I look at that, especially as Greg's wife and being a partner in ministry, and it would be devastating to our church, his ministry. It'd be devastating. And I know that. And so the more things I can put in place to keep me on the right track, the better, the way I feel about that. And I still think that, that God, I look back at everything and people are like, don't you wish you could change things? And I'm like, yes and no. I mean, do I wish I didn't hurt people? Yes, 100%. But I was weak before all this. I was weak. I was a total doormat. I was fragile. I mean, I was so just shoulders down.
No self-confidence.
No self-confidence. And going through all that, beating that kind of addiction, and any kind of addiction, but in my mind, beating that kind of addiction, I mean, I'm like, what else? What could Christ not do? What could I not do? I mean, didn't get proud, like, oh, it was all me, like puffed up proud. But I'm like, at the same time, like, man, I did a big thing. Like, this is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know all things are possible. And I would say, I go back to the Bible. It's all things are possible through Christ. And that's how I live. But I'm like, man, I'm different now. Like, even Greg looks at me, he's like, how could you have self-confidence issues? Like, I'm sorry, I don't see that. I'm like, I telling you, I mean, and my dad,
They almost killed me.
yeah, my dad can vouch for it.
Yeah. I mean,
he's still Greg. Like, we had no clue. We didn't know how to help her see what we saw. And like I said, I had tons of friends. I went to a huge school, tons of friends.
Didn't
Most
matter.
People would say,
Yep,
she was
I get
popular.
it.
She was this. It doesn't matter. I look back at my size 8 body, which I thought was huge back then. And I hated it. I was like, because everybody else was a 4 or and I'm like, I'm an 8. I'm
that
maybe be a 10,
comparison.
and,
Oh my gosh.
I'm an athlete, but I weighed more. And so like, I can't, and I remember even like a drill team kind of thing going, you weigh too much. And I'm like, ugh. And here I was like at 8'10", and I weighed too much. And I'm thinking, I don't really blame her, but I'm like, man, that you're an adult. Like, you got to be careful what you say to young girls.
Right, because they listen.
Yeah. And I did, and it hurt, and it hurt me. But all that to say, the drugs were my choices. I mean, I made a decision. I made a foolish decision. My decision was, 6 weeks, I'm done. Just get a little jump start, lose about 15 pounds, and I'll feel good. And then I was done. I was hooked, 100%. And it's a miracle that I quit. It's just a miracle.
Well, and the things that, I love how you put that, because I wouldn't take a single day of my nightmare back. I just wouldn't, because I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. The number of people that you've already said that have reached out to you, that, I mean, God will use all things for the good.
Yeah.
All things for the good, and it's not, this is part of my story, and it's not up to me who I just believe that yes, I made choices. Yes, you made choices, but God's like, okay, I can use this to save some of my other kids with, that are going to go down that same path.
Willing, and that's why I love what you're doing here, and how open you are as well, because it's not, I mean, sometimes people look at drug addicts and alcoholics and things like that, or they're the bums on the street,
right?
The people,
paper bag.
No, these are working people. These are corporate people. These are people that have own businesses, and people that have, I mean, it doesn't discriminate.
Right.
It does not discriminate.
Right.
Like, you, just because you were raised great. I mean, I really honestly look back at my life. I don't know that I could have had a better childhood.
Wow.
I don't know that I could have had better parents, wonderful people. And, just because you were given everything, and I don't even think I was given everything. I was given everything I needed in here. But I mean, it's almost like Satan had a hold, and he was like, no, you're sorry. You're not going to make anything. You're a loser. You're not, you're not pretty. You're fat. You're this, you're that. I mean, it just was constantly to where I just believed all this stuff. I just always believed it. And then unfortunately I got in a marriage where he
confirmed
that stuff. And, bless his heart, he had his own issues. So that is what it is on that. But I know that for me, I wouldn't change it. I mean, I wouldn't change it. I learned a lot. I think the things that I say is, I know my addiction and everything I went through, and the lifestyle I began to live really, really, really hurt my son. And that I would love to change. That I would love to change, because there are times, I mean, he is better now, but he has struggled a long time. And a lot of it is his choices. He's now 32, but a lot of it is as a result of a lot of things that he went through as a child because of me.
But you know what? Even those kids, though, because I have 3 bio kids that live through, my stuff with me, and it's like even they now can make a choice to use that for the good, because there's so many
and stop
kids
using it as an excuse.
Yes,
I mean,
as a victim, right? Yeah. As a victim, and it's like, okay, look around, and there's so many other either adult children right? Because I'm an adult child of an alcoholic. So many others, even the teenagers that he could reach that go when there's such magic. And I hate using the word magic because I know better, but there is something magical about someone looking you in your eyes and saying, I know exactly how you feel. I know how that feels. Let me tell you what I did. Or let me tell you some truth, right? Sure. That's not your fault. And they're sick. You have to look past, the value that he could bring,
and I think so. And I think the older he gets and the more he's gotten himself on the right track, the more he can see those things. My prayer is that he just stays that way, that he stays, and we have a good relationship now. We talk a lot. He lives in Dallas and we talk and stuff like that. And it's hard when things go wrong for him or things like that. My first thought always is, I did this. I did this. And my husband's like, babe, no, I mean, you're 15 years down the road. It's half of his life. At some point it's his choices.
Right.
And I think he knows that too. I don't think he's at a point of blaming anymore. I mean, in fact, I know he's not.
Yeah.
He's not at that point. But I get to that point. Like, I'm like, that was me. He had a terrible, I look back at all the things I did and didn't do and the people I allowed in my home that really, in some cases victimized my own son, and I'm like, wow, and here I had this great childhood and, my parents would have never allowed anything like that to happen to me. And the drugs took me to a place where I was apathetic or I didn't want to know or, things like that. So it's really tough. But I wrestle with that. To me, that's where the devil can get me. He makes me start to thinking about,
coulda, woulda, shouldas, and right.
And I have to get out of that space a lot.
Well, and another reason staying close to your community to because at least and for me, I mean, I'm a little over 11 years down the road. Even very recently, a couple of days ago, I'm calling my sponsor and going, here's what I'm thinking. Am I crazy? And she's like, yep,
you are.
You are. Yeah. Put that down. It's not yours to carry. Put it down and go help somebody. And it's like, oh, okay, that's right. I forgot.
Like, once you do that, once you're like, okay, and you kind of get out of your own head and you're like, how can I serve? How can I help?
Yes.
And sometimes it's not even helping somebody in recovery. It's just like getting out of your head and doing something for someone else, whatever that is.
Right.
And I think for me, I just got back from church camp with youth kids and I was reminded why I'm 52 and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so hard. It was so hot and hard all the time. But I'm like, you know what? It's serving and it feels good. It feels good to love on other kids. And and most of the kids that go with us to camp have great lives and some of them don't have as great of life and they have a lot of struggles at home. And so it's like, just being able to be there and be solid. Present. And I'm open with the kids. They know my story. They know every bit of my story. And I tell our youth kids what I've been through because I want them, if it comes up, I want to be a call.
Right.
I want somebody to call.
I want to be a source.
And that I can help them. And because some of them deal with it with their own parents and some deal with these days they're dealing with it in 7th grade at school with kids. And it's a scary thing. And it's not even just with that. It's just all kinds of pressures that those kids have.
Right.
That we didn't have that kind of pressure. I mean, we had pressures, yes, but they're just growing up so fast. And I think a lot of it has to do with, our phones and, everything that, I look back and I'm like, gosh, I'm really glad we didn't have that kind of stuff when I was growing up. Like everything on the internet, everything out there.
Oh my gosh, no evidence.
Yeah. But these kids are dealing with that and then some. And it seems like the bullying is stronger than it's ever been, and lots of things like that. So I'm open.
Well, and it started from what I heard you say, Casey. I mean, it started so much within self, your self-esteem, your self-worth. I mean. If we can get to kids, which again, who knows what it would have taken. And I know your faith. I mean, nothing happens in God's world by accident. Sure. Nothing. And so could something have changed the trajectory of who knows? But who knows? Being as open as you are with those kids, so that they can see that they can be their fallible selves with you as well.
And that's what I want, and that's why I like working with kids and stuff like that. I mean, like I said, I don't know what would have changed for me. I mean, I think my parents really did everything. I was involved in church, all the things. It just was, it was a bad self-confidence issue that just plagued me, honestly, for
Boy,
a
it
lot of
sounds.
years.
I'll tell you what. Whoever was coaching them, or I think it was
Yeah.
Holy Spirit or what. But they just textbooked.
They
I mean,
did.
handled you with
They
it.
did.
That is
They got some help
beautiful.
from friends. There wasn't many friends that had gone before them in this, but there was a couple. But then they also got help from like Al-Anon and how to help, and they talked to counselors and pastors and like, what do we do? And they did. They held the line. And as much as they love me, I really believe that they would have pushed me out if I think they would have. And I think that's kind of where I think things change sometimes around here. I think parenting to an extent has become softer.
Right.
And so
100%.
kids feel
Yeah.
like they can, you say that, but are you really going to do it? And I really believe that they would have done it. I really do. And I think it would have killed them both, but they would have done it.
Right.
And at that point I was tired. I mean, I was ready.
You're tired of your own self.
I was ready. I was ready for something different. And, I got a job. I didn't work. I worked with my mom. She worked at this little gift store, from time to time. And I would go in with her during that first year. And I got a job on my 1 year clean date. A 1 year. And it was another fundraising job back into my field. But the interesting thing was, so October, before I got clean in January, I stole a bracelet from JCPenney's. And I got arrested. And I got arrested less for the bracelet, but more for warrants. I had, bounce checks and unpaid tickets.
Yeah.
Just the wreckage, the wreckage that's back there.
Yep.
And so I got arrested. But the interesting thing was the bracelet I stole had the Serenity Prayer on it.
Are you kidding me?
I'm not kidding
Oh my gosh. So God was sending you little nods
I
going,
stole that
hello,
bracelet. I know.
hello.
And the funny thing is my mom actually went back up there and bought that bracelet and kept it for me for a while. And then she gave it to me later. But I stole the bracelet with the Serenity Prayer.
That's crazy.
And that was October. And I remember being in jail because my parents were out of town. So there wasn't anybody coming to get me. And I remember they called. I don't know how. I think I gave them Carson's number, which I don't know why I would have. But I'm sitting there in the back room at JCPenney's with, the security and all that. And I guess I guess I gave them Carson's number, which I don't know why I would have done that. But there he is out there asking, please don't. And and I can hear him out there, and I'm like, why did I do that? But anyway, so, he just went through a ton. He was at work. He was working at Texas Roadhouse. He left to come see what was going on. Anyway, went back to work. But the crazy thing is I had meth not on me. It was in my car. So I didn't get it. I got arrested for the theft, but it was a small misdemeanor theft, but a year. So that was on my record. It got dismissed. I did some things,
community service or whatever.
So
Yeah.
it got dismissed. But so when I was applying for this job, it was at a university and it was a fundraising position. And they did the background check and the application said, do you have any felonies? Which I did not. But they did the background check and it came up with a misdemeanor theft on it. And so they called me. They're like, the vice president of the university called over my area and he was like, so this came up on your background check. And I just kind of need to know a little bit about what this is about.
And you were a year sober.
Yes, I was almost. I hadn't quite hit my 1 year. So I was like, all right, this is where you just lay it out. So, I laid it all out. I said, this is where I am. This is where I'm in my recovery. I was a meth addict. Here I'm telling them all these stuff. And I'm thinking,
I'm done.
Yep. But I'm telling them anyway. I'm like, well, this is your first chance to be honest.
There you go.
So I'm like, this is what I do. I stole this bracelet and I told them I had the Serenity Prayer. I said, I'm in recovery. I go to meetings, multiple times a day. I'm very, down the road, blah, 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 all the things. And he was like, okay. He goes, well, we'll give you a shout back. And I was like, okay. But then he called back a couple of days later. He's like, we're going to take a chance. I was like, what?
Wow.
So my first day to start was my 1 year clean date. And even now, every time that rolls around, I get a text from him, and I haven't worked there in years, or he'll text me, or I'll text him, like, because that job is what started giving me confidence back.
Right.
Too. I started getting back in that field, and then I left the fundraising field and got into financial planning, which my dad had a business for years, and so I've been doing that for a long time now. But that job really was kind of a catalyst for my confidence and,
self-esteem.
And just being, and he took a risk. He did not have to do that. And honestly, I'm a fundraiser and I got a theft and you're going to hire me. Like, it's like crazy when you think about it, but it was God. I think it was totally God saying, and he was a believer. So I feel like, he just he took that risk and did it.
Well, and I got to tell you, I think souls recognize other souls when they're telling them the truth.
Yeah.
Just the truth.
Yeah,
because
there's no denying,
it's so rare. It's so
Yeah.
rare that people, at least the people that I know that are in recovery that do the deal, they walk around with their guts hanging out. They just do. And it's like, these are my guts. You take me, leave me. I don't,
Not very
but
pretty, but
I'm
here
not
it
trying
is.
to hide them. I'm not trying to put makeup on them. I'm not trying to, make you think you're not seeing what you see. It's
Right.
just, here it is,
Yeah.
and it's just so, I don't know, just the connection that you make with people when you're just your authentic self is
And,
just
for
beautiful.
for him to take that risk and do it, I was just always so grateful. We're so grateful. In fact, and I worked for him until Greg and I got married and I moved down here, and then I worked remotely for a little bit here. So I mean, just great people. And it's just like, man, you did not have to do that. And the fact that he did was amazing because it gave me a real boost. It gave me a real confidence boost, and just kind of realized like I can't get my life back. Like this is not, and there's some, and I don't remember where it is in the big book. It's back in the stories at the back and the individual stories. And it talks about this guy talks about, I've got a life that I never would have had before. I mean, it's given me so much back, so much back than that. This program has given me so much more, and I'm living a life I would have never lived before.
It's not just a matter of stopping
Yeah.
the act of using.
Yeah, then you become a dry drunk, or
Right,
whatever,
that's-
if you don't,
yeah.
if you don't get to it. And using alcohol, everything. It's the surface problem, like the root.
It's a symptom.
You got to get to the root. I mean, that's just the presenting problem, and that's what people that end up just stopping drinking, but they don't really get to the root of it. Then
Right.
they have all the same characteristics and flaws and, I mean, defects of character and everything like that that they had that got them into it.
Well, and then they're compounded because there's nothing to
nothing
take
filter it
that
or
away,
stop, yeah.
right?
Yeah, and it's heartbreaking. We've got several people I know at church and things like that are really trying, but it's like, and they're like, well, I messed up again. I'm like, well, have you gone to a meeting? No, it's just not for me. I'm like, I don't know how to help you. I don't know what to do.
Right. Well, and
Like, I
that's
don't know
just
what to do at
that's
this
the
point.
disease. Well, there's nothing to do.
Yeah,
That's the disease, and that's where at least over the past 11 years, I can see that gift of desperation. That I'm kind of convinced that has to happen. It has to be there for recovery to start. There has to be. You have to be sick and tired of your own self. And I love how you put that. But yeah, the drink, the drug, all of that. Those are just symptoms
it's just
of a
the presenting
much
problem.
deeper
Yeah.
thing. And that's hard for people to wrap their heads around.
Yeah, if you don't find then it'll be something else.
Right.
It may not be.
And it's going to be bad.
Yeah, and it may not be a substance. It could manifest itself in all kinds of other things, and anger and pride and all the things that can get in your way. And it just, I don't know. I'm not trying to be a snob about recovery, but at the same time, it's like I can't meet with you regularly,
Right.
and do all this kind of stuff if you're not in recovery. It's the only thing I know. It's what worked for me, and I can't help you with something that didn't work for me.
Well, and
I
not
can help
only
you
that
with
it's
something that worked for
not
me.
only that it's it worked for me, so it's like I'm witness to
Yes.
so many other
Yes.
people
Yeah.
that have a productive, meaningful, joyful life because of working the program of recovery.
I know one person that she was really it was more like crack and bad addict. And she's successful now. She's a teacher, art teacher, and she probably on occasion drinks wine. And we talked about it, and I was like, it's risky. It's putting your toe in. And she's never had a problem. She doesn't really keep it in her house. She goes to, like, with her girlfriends, they may go to a winery and she has a drink or whatever. And I worry so much about that. But at the same time, hey, if that works for you and you can handle it, I'm not your conscience. Like, you have to do that. But to me, it's so risky. It's just so risky. And so I just decided from get-go, I don't drink. Do I mind going to dinner with people and they have a drink?
Not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all.
I've always told Greg, if I ever am in a position where I'm like, I'm ready to go, you got to know we got to go. And he's like, 100%, we'll do that. And there's been a time or two we've been somewhere with a bunch of people or concert or something. I'm like, this is a little much for me.
Right.
And we'll take off. We'll go. No big deal. And that's how Greg is. Greg's like, no, I mean, even Greg, like every once in a while he may have a beer or something, but we don't, we don't keep anything in the house. We don't, nothing like that. Nothing. And if we're on a cruise and he wants to have a beer, I'm great with that because he didn't have a problem. I'm fine with that. But if I were to ever say, I don't want you to ever drink again, he'd be like, done.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And so I'm fine with that. But I also know that I can always say, hey, this is enough, or I want to leave. I don't like this place. And
he helps take care of you. Right.
Yeah. Because I mean, I'm his priority as well. And he doesn't want anything like that. He doesn't want me to lose all that I've worked for.
Right.
And all that we have. And everything I have now I know is obviously a gift of God, but it's also from a lot of dedication to keeping my life on the right track. And do I miss the mark some with life? Yeah, all the time. I mean, I miss the mark. I just don't drink or do drugs anymore.
Right.
But I get in my head sometimes and do stupid stuff.
Sure.
I mean, we all do that. But I know how to quickly get that turned back around.
Well, and clean it up if it's affected someone else.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Live a life of peace. But if we're doing the deal, we should be pretty much anywhere that there's, because again, alcohol, at least alcohol for me was not my problem. I was my problem. Sure. But I totally get what you're saying, especially if someone gets a little sloppy or something like that. Yeah, it's like, okay, this is not,
it's not for me.
I'm seeing, and the truth be known, I'm seeing myself in that, and I'm like, ooh, that's ugly. I don't want to see that anymore. So let's just leave.
And I think that's just another way of keeping myself protected. That's why we don't have alcohol in the house. We don't, we just don't do those things. We, it's like, I just need to keep myself kind of like when I very first started, in my first year of being clean, when I finally got a bank account, it had my dad's name on and my name on. Here I'm in my, 38 years old, and I've got a bank account with my dad that I'm not even a signer on. I mean, he's like, we are
baby steps.
I mean, baby steps.
Yep.
And so
you got to learn how to live.
That. I appreciated all that. And I think that I've constantly kept those kind of stop gaps in my life to keep me on the right track.
Well, and for me too, I don't have alcohol in my house. I can't allow it in my house. I have to have one place on this earth that is solely mine, and I'm safe. And I'm safe. Not that I think about alcohol. I don't think about alcohol, but it would take one tragedy or one, horrible thing. And if it's right there, why would you even take that chance?
Yeah. And that's kind of that's how I think. I'm like, I don't even have a desire to drink or use or anything, but people are like, well, can you have a champagne toast at New Year's Eve? I was like, no, I can't.
Why would I take the chance to activate that disease again?
Never. And could I realistically? Maybe, but what if I couldn't?
Right.
That's kind of what I think. That he'll play the tape all the way through.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like, but what if I couldn't?
Well, and the big thing to realize too, for those that are listening, this disease, there is no cure. Right. There is no cure. And there's a saying, in the rooms of recovery, my disease is out in the parking lot doing push-ups. Waiting for me. And that's all it's going to take is for me to walk out in a weak state, not having done the deal, talk to my sponsor, go to meetings and all of that. It's out there waiting for me. It's out there waiting for me, and it's good, and so so I have to keep taking the medicine, if you will, which is the doing the program, all the aspects of the program as it was presented 88 years ago. And I get to live a peaceful life that I don't have anyone I need to say I'm sorry to right now.
And when we do, we take care of it.
Right, immediately.
Yeah,
right.
You take care of it. And I think that's something that's been. And did I lose people through this that never really came back after? Yeah, I mean, I hurt people. So there are some that's like, okay, you can give me your amends, but peace out.
I'm done. Right. And
I'm like, okay,
and that's okay too. I understand.
I mean, I had one that wouldn't even let me do amends.
Oh wow.
And so my sponsor's like, well, write it, mail it, return to sender.
That's all you
I got
can.
it back.
Yep.
So it's like, okay, well, that I've done what I can do.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like, the whole keep your side of the street. Like I
Right.
can only do what I
Do
can do.
so much.
But for the most part, that whole process was such a healing process and very humbling.
Well, and that was something, again, I keep saying you can put down. How many of us, look up and all of a sudden we're holding all these things that don't belong to us. This thing that my kid's going through, this thing at work, I have this deal that went through. The husband's upset, so I'm carrying his shit.
Carrying that too,
And it's like, no wonder I'm tired. No wonder I'm weak.
So put down the bag. And that's what Greg's always like,
put it
you're
down.
carrying bags that are not yours.
Yes.
Like, stop. And I'm like, I know. But I'm a fixer too. So I think part of it is that, like, even at church, like stuff that's going on at church, like Greg's like, babe, that is not your area.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let that go. That's not your area. And if something's not going right, I'm all like, I'm into everything. And he's like, if this event isn't going right or it's not how you would do it, so what?
Well, we internalize
So
it.
what?
We
Like,
internalize it because I'm finding my value in
Yes,
this,
yeah,
right? Which is not the truth.
I remember one time we had an event at church and it was so silly. It was like, well, the table, like where people walk in, needs to be blah. And it wasn't my event. I wasn't planning it. And I'm like, and Greg's like, babe, like, and I was getting so worked up about the table and about this and about that. And finally he came over to me. He goes, we're leaving in 5 minutes if you don't take it down. I was like, that is so rude.
But thank you.
But yes, thank you. But so
I'm going to
did.
yell at you later
I was
about
like,
that,
yeah,
but
I know.
thank
But
you.
so I did because I'm like, does anyone else know that
Right.
this stuff is in my
majoring
mind
in the
out of-
minors.
out of whack? No. And was the event fine? Yes. But in my head, I'm like, no, this isn't. This is, no, it can't go like this. I know they need to be doing this. Does someone need to let people? Who's doing the?
What are they going to think?
yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like Greg's like, babe, we are out of here in 2 minutes. Like, okay.
That bad, huh?
But so I mean, so myself kind of comes back in. I think I went for so many years not controlling anything that sometimes I'm like,
Hyper control. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always about the outcome. What do people think?
Which is never good for anybody
no.
around us.
No, gosh, no.
I get it.
Not at all.
I
And
get
Greg's
it.
kind of the opposite of like, he's a pastor, but he's also like, I don't care what people think. Like, God's called me to do this.
Mm-hmm.
If I say something that steps on toes, promise you I'm stepping on my own. So there's not, if somebody gets mad, they get mad. Like,
Right.
I can't, and I'm like, let me explain what he meant by that. Like, please don't
Right.
be mad. And he's like, no, you cannot do that. Like, you cannot chase that down.
Get in your lane, sister.
Yeah, I know,
Get in
I
your
know.
lane.
And I often get out of my lane. So
I do too.
and that's what I'm saying. We're still flawed. We still have work to do. We still have stuff, but the program in and of itself is a way of life. It's a way of
Right.
living and even though you may not be dealing with a substance, you may not be dealing with alcohol, you're dealing with life.
Yep, and it's going to keep on doing the
Yes.
lifey things,
Yeah,
isn't it?
it is.
It
So
sure
get something
does.
that you can work. And that's why my mom, she had the 12 steps posted like on her little desk there and she wasn't an addict.
Oh, I love it.
But she's like, it's a way of life. It's a way of living. It's a way of living. It's a way of clearing your mind at the end of the day, knowing you did everything you need to do, making sure those amends were made, making sure you lay your head down, making sure you know where you're serving, making sure all these things are happening because all those things is a package deal. You cannot do 1 through 9, do your amends and
Right.
you're done.
Right.
You got to continue with 10
Well, and the
12.
beautiful thing is you take those steps all the way up to 12 and you slide down the banister. And at least for me, daily,
a sudden you're
I
like,
start
oh,
back
wow,
at
I'm
1.
back
I
at
have
4.
no or 1.
Yeah.
What do I
Yeah.
have power? I'm
Yeah.
powerless. I'm powerless, and there is such beauty in being powerless. Because if I don't have to carry it around,
Yeah.
I don't have to. There's just such peace in that because I'm constantly picking up things that don't belong to me.
Yep.
And
And I
it's
still do that too. I mean, we're human. We're sinful. I've got issues that I deal with on a regular basis, but I know how to deal with them.
right.
And I know that in like I said, like through Christ and through prayer, and I remember praying for the first time after I was clean. I was like, why was I so scared to pray? But I was so ashamed.
Oh, sure.
And so now it's like, man, that's my lifeline. Like I find myself driving down the road praying, going to sleep praying.
Yep.
And not just, and a lot of times my prayers are for other people, but a lot of times they're for me
Mm-hmm.
and what I've got going on. I mean, just because you don't drink or don't do drugs anymore, it doesn't mean your life is altogether
Sure.
great.
Oh
We
gosh.
still have things we deal with.
Right.
I still have to think of the reasons why I got there.
Mm-hmm.
And just because I appear very self-confident now, there are times I have some confidence issues. that creep back up in the back of my
Sure.
brain, and I got to figure out how to deal with that. We're
Because that's
we're
dangerous
working on this. It
territory.
is. And
That's
I
dangerous
know what it
territory.
did. And I do. And lucky for me, so blessed to have a husband that can see that, and he can really pull me back. Like, hey,
Remind you where your
that is
power
not-
comes
that-
from.
Like, that's
yeah.
not, those thoughts are, that's not real. Like, that's not how this is. Like, pull it back together.
We are blessed. I was telling, I did a podcast, a friend's podcast yesterday. I sat right there, as a matter of fact, and I was talking about how Rick, we are very blessed to have those strong men in our lives.
Yes.
But early on, he had met a lady that attends my home group. Her name is Anna, and so they're on very rare occasions, because I still I go to at least two meetings a week.
Yeah.
I talk to my sponsor every single week. But there will be times where life has gotten in hyper mode, and I've missed about a week or so.
Sure.
But Rick will come in my office, and he'll just be dinking with something, and he'll go, "How's Anna?" And usually I'm spinning, in my own world, and I'm like, oh, I guess she's okay. I don't know, but and get out. But it's a reminder. I don't know how Anna is, and if I don't know how Anna is, I can tell you damn well how I am.
Yeah.
I'm spinning out of control, and I better get down to that meeting and find out how Anna is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But instead of going, boy, you need a meeting, which I would claw his eyes out. Yeah, easy.
Yeah.
So a gentle way of just going, you need to reconnect with your people, because he knows he's not it.
Sure.
Oh,
for sure. I mean, Greg still doesn't really understand addiction. I mean, he's never had a problem that didn't have it in his family.
Weird.
Yeah, never. I mean, it's like, he's weird, but no, it doesn't have it. And I mean, I know he's grown a lot, because his point was always like, it's killing you, so stop.
Yeah. Well, that's a good thought.
That sounds good.
That's reasonable
on paper, but that doesn't happen that way. And so he had not a lot of
references,
sympathy, really, for people in addiction before me.
Wow.
And when we met,
You've given him an
I already had
education, huh?
Yeah, I already had 3 years clean. I mean, I was like, hey, these are open meetings. Let's go. Wanted him to come to these meetings with me, because he had no, I mean, he'd come out of there being like, huge, like, oh my gosh. Like, yeah, if it were that easy, babe. I mean, it's not that easy, but his thing is, it's hurting you, so stop, because he didn't have an addictive personality.
Right.
And if something's, he used to chew for a long time. He's like, this is jacking with me, my teeth. I'm going to stop. And he stopped. Okay,
That's just
good
weird.
for you.
Well, one of the things I learned, and I knew it, but I didn't know I knew it. Knew I knew it until a sponsee recently got married and to a normie, and what I explained to him is, I said, you have to come into our world. We can't live in your world. So just know, as long as you know that, you have to come into our world. And he's like, I'm totally willing. And I'm like, good, you got my blessing.
Yeah.
Because we can't survive in your world.
Exactly right.
And Rick is so grateful to be in our world.
Oh yeah.
He
and that's what
loves
Greg is
it.
too. I mean, Greg's constantly like, Greg's big thing in life is tell your story. He's big on
tell your truth.
Tell your story, because people need to know. People need hope. They need to know. I mean, you may be a month further down the road than somebody, but then that gives them hope that you're there. So whatever it is, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to tell your story. And the way I look at it, and I was talking to the kids about that, that this, or I don't know if it was this week or anyway, but like, it's your story. You're not gonna mess it up.
Own it.
So tell it. Help somebody. These kids, I promise you, they've gone through a lot of other things that earlier in life than we did.
Right.
So let's talk about it. Let's tell your story. Let's help your friend. Let's do that. And I think that's kind of Greg's big push at church is like, tell, who is Jesus to you? What has he done? That song, Let Me Tell You About My Jesus.
Right.
What is, we say my Jesus because Jesus is different. Jesus is the same, but he's different to me than he might be to you or someone else. Like
the same way, if you have 3 kids, you don't have the exact same relationship with each and every one of them.
So tell your story. Don't be ashamed. And because all we need in this world, people need hope. This world is pretty hopeless at times. So people need hope. So where do we get hope? Where do we get hope?
Right.
So let's share it.
We got to keep shining the light
we have
into
to keep
that
shining the light
darkness.
and know that it's possible.
And we have to keep being the ones that are so comfortable with our darkness, we're willing to go into someone else's darkness and help them find the way.
Into groups and being like, you have 11 years, you have
Yep.
15 years, what? Like, never, no way.
Why are you still?
Yeah, why are you still here? And I'll never. I remember thinking that.
You're clearly not
never.
getting the program.
Yeah,
you know, if you have to keep.
never.
Oh,
Well, I get there. That's too far away. But I mean, getting every little milestone.
yes.
And just thinking, man, I mean, before you know it, you're at 5 years, 10 years. And it's like, and people say, well, do you miss, when you get together with girlfriends and they have wine, do you miss it? No, absolutely not.
Not at all.
I absolutely love ginger ale. If they go to a thing, I usually get ginger ale. I love it. And drinking, sometimes I'll get fancy and have them throw a lime in it.
There you go.
Maybe I'll get a Virgin Bloody Mary. Get really crazy.
If it's a holiday, that's right. Wild and crazy. Well, I am so grateful to you coming and telling your story, and I love that you're a warrior for recovery.
Of course.
We've got to keep shining the light on the darkness. So anyway, that is our time.
Awesome.
Thank you so much again to Erica McDonald Photography for sponsoring this episode. I'm so grateful to you. I love you, Erica. Thank you for listening to the Purpose Driven Sobriety. Keep coming back. Thanks for listening to Purpose Driven Sobriety. Keep coming back.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.